In a remote cabin, an elderly woman lives a life of solitude and struggle, marked by poverty and the absence of her son, who vanished years ago. One day, a starving young man knocks on her door, and what begins as a simple act of kindness triggers a revelation that will change their lives. Mother and son, faced with the hidden truth, must reconcile with a past that seemed lost forever. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's get into it. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. The sun hadn't yet risen when Helen opened her eyes. 72 years of life weighed on her shoulders like stones she had carried every day for as long as she could remember. The wooden bed frame creaked under her thin body, a sound that had become part of the morning symphony in that small, humble house, lost in the backwoods of upstate New York, on the outskirts of a town called Oak Haven, where civilization seemed to have forgotten to reach. She got up slowly, feeling every joint protest the movement. Her calloused hands gripped the edge of the thin mattress as her bare feet touched the uneven plank floor. The early morning chill seeped through the cracks in the walls, a reminder that winter was approaching and that once again she would have to find the strength to face it alone. The routine was always the same. There was a certain security in the repetition, a comfort in knowing exactly what came next. Helen lit the kerosene lamp, as electricity had never made it to this abandoned property where she had built her home years ago. The weak light illuminated the cabin's interior, revealing peeling walls, old furniture, and a simplicity that bordered on destitution. In the small kitchen, which also served as a living room and sitting area, a wooden table occupied the center. On it, always the same objects: a dented aluminum mug, a deep plate with a crack she had mended with wire, and a wooden spoon worn down by time. Next to the wood-burning stove, a half-empty sack of rice, and another of beans that needed to last until the end of the month. There was no full pantry, no variety. There was only the bare minimum to keep her body going. Helen put water on to boil. The coffee was weak, made with yesterday's grounds mixed with a fresh pinch of powder. There had been no sugar for 2 weeks, but she no longer missed it. Her palate, like so many other things, had grown accustomed to absence. While she waited for the water to boil, she looked out the glassless window, protected only by a board she had nailed up herself. Outside, the day was beginning to break. The trees surrounding the property swayed in the wind, making a sound she knew by heart. Birds began to sing, announcing another day. For many, it would be a new beginning, full of possibilities. For Helen, it would be just another day like the ones before, marked by loneliness and the constant struggle to survive. She drank the hot coffee, feeling the liquid go down and warm her empty stomach. Then she began to prepare what would be her lunch and also her dinner: a handful of rice, a few beans, and if she was lucky, a piece of squash left over from the last harvest of the battered garden she kept out back. It wasn't much, but it was what she had. And Helen had learned over so many years of deprivation to be grateful for the little she had. As she stirred the beans in the pot, her mind wandered. It was inevitable. In moments of silence, when her hands worked automatically, the memories returned like relentless waves. She tried not to think, tried to keep her mind busy, but it was impossible. Some pains were too deep to be ignored, some wounds never fully healed. There was a time when her life had been different. Not luxurious, not rich, but different. There had been voices in that house. There had been laughter. There had been life. Helen closed her eyes for a moment, allowing the memory to take shape. A small boy, with dark hair and curious eyes, running through the yard, his high-pitched voice calling, "Mom! Mom! Look what I found!" His little hands, dirty with soil, holding an insect, a twig, anything that sparked a child's curiosity. Gabriel. His name was Gabriel. Helen's heart clenched in her chest. She opened her eyes quickly, pushing the memory away as if it were a hot coal. She couldn't think about it. She couldn't let the pain take over, not now. Not when there was a whole day ahead and work to be done. Sadness was a luxury she couldn't afford, because if she started to cry, she might never stop. But memories didn't obey reason. They came when they wanted, bringing with them the full weight of years of searching, of hope, of despair. Helen remembered every detail of that terrible day, even though so many years had passed. The day Gabriel disappeared from her life. She had been working in the fields, under the scorching sun, trying to pull a living for herself and the boy from the dry earth. Life was already hard back then. Her husband had left years before, unable to bear the poverty and responsibilities. He left Helen alone with a baby in her arms and no resources. But she fought. She worked as a housekeeper, did laundry, mended clothes, did everything to ensure her son had at least food in his belly and a roof over his head. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. When Gabriel was 6, the situation became unbearable. Helen could no longer work and take care of the boy at the same time. That's when Joyce appeared, a kindly-looking woman who lived in town and went to church. She offered to help, said she knew a family in New York City, good people who were willing to take care of Gabriel for a while, give him an education, good food, opportunities Helen could never provide. "Just until you get back on your feet," Joyce had said. "Just until things get better. Then you can come get the boy." Helen resisted at first. The idea of being separated from her son, even temporarily, was unbearable. But hunger was gnawing, the roof leaked when it rained, and Gabriel was getting thinner and thinner. She looked at her son's little face, at those big, innocent eyes, and made the hardest decision of her life. She agreed. Joyce took Gabriel on a Sunday afternoon. Helen remembered kissing the boy's face 1,000 times, holding his little hands and promising that soon, very soon, they would be together again. Gabriel cried, clung to his mother's skirt, but Joyce was firm and gentle at the same time. "It'll be good for him, Helen. You'll see, it's what's best for the boy." That was the last time Helen saw her son. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Helen found a better job, saved some money, fixed up the house. She was ready to bring Gabriel back. But when she went looking for Joyce, she discovered the woman had moved. No one knew where. She knocked on every door, asked everyone who knew Joyce, but no one had any information about her or the boy's whereabouts. Despair consumed Helen. She went to the police, but being poor and without resources, no one took her case seriously. "Ma'am, you gave the boy away, now you want him back," they said. "It doesn't work like that." She tried to hire a lawyer, but she had no money. She traveled to New York City whenever she could scrape together enough for a bus ticket, wandered through neighborhoods, showed Gabriel's worn-out photo to strangers, but never found a single clue. The years passed. Hope, which at first burned like an intense flame, slowly turned to embers, then to ash. Helen never stopped looking, but the reality of life, the need to survive, made her accept that she might never see her son again. Maybe he was okay, maybe he had the better life she could never have offered. That's what she clung to on the loneliest nights, when the pain was too much to bear. Now, at 72, Helen lived in that remote cabin, far from everything and everyone. She had gradually withdrawn from society, unable to stand the questions, the pitying looks, the empty promises that things would get better. Here, in the silence of the woods, she could exist without having to explain her pain to anyone. The beans were ready. Helen turned off the heat and sat at the table, staring at the plate of food. Her mind returned to the present, pushing away the memories that insisted on tormenting her. She needed to eat, needed to keep her body going. Not for herself necessarily, but out of sheer stubbornness, a refusal to give up completely. The afternoon arrived, slow and hot. Helen went outside to tend to her small garden. The plants were weak, some already withered by the relentless sun and lack of water. She watered what she could with water from the well, which was also low. Every drop was precious. Every resource had to be managed with extreme care. As she worked on her knees in the dirt, her hands caked with mud, she heard a sound. Footsteps. Someone was approaching. Helen raised her head, surprised. Rarely did anyone come out here. The path was difficult, overgrown, and few people knew she lived in this forgotten place. She stood up slowly, wiping her hands on her worn apron. At first she couldn't see who it was. The bright, direct sunlight created a dark silhouette against the horizon, but as the figure drew closer, Helen could make out more details. It was a young man, maybe in his early 30s. Tall, thin, with clothes that had seen better days. His shirt was dirty with dust and sweat. his pants torn at the knees. His dark hair was disheveled, his face marked by the fatigue of someone who had walked a long way. But what caught Helen's attention most were his eyes. Even from a distance, she could see they were tired eyes that had seen too much, that carried an invisible weight. The man stopped a few yards from her, hesitant. He seemed to be deciding whether to continue or turn back. There was something in his posture that revealed discomfort, vulnerability. Finally, he took a few more steps and stopped again. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice hoarse and low. Helen didn't answer immediately. She was surprised, confused, and also slightly apprehensive. Women alone in the country learned to be wary of strangers. But at the same time, there was something about this man that didn't seem threatening. There was, in fact, an evident fragility, a humanity that touched something inside her. "Good afternoon," she finally replied, her voice steady despite her age. "Sorry to bother you," the man continued, running a hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. "I was walking down the road and saw smoke. I thought maybe someone was here. I'm hungry, haven't eaten since yesterday. Would you have anything at all? I don't have money to pay, but I can work, do some chores in exchange." Helen watched him in silence. There was sincerity in that voice, an honesty that couldn't be faked, and there was also a restrained desperation, a basic need she knew all too well. Hunger, real hunger, the kind that hurts, that weakens, that humiliates. She should be suspicious, she should send him away, but something inside her, some part that still refused to become, completely hard and closed off, reacted differently. "Come in," she said, surprising herself. "I don't have much, but I can share." The relief on the man's face was instantaneous. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you so much, Mom. You have no idea how much this means." Helen gestured with her hand for him to follow. They walked back to the house, she in front, he a few steps behind. When they entered the cabin, the man looked around, taking in the extreme simplicity of the place. He made no comment, but Helen noticed the expression on his face. It wasn't pity, it wasn't judgment, it was something more like understanding. She served what she had, the rest of the rice and beans she had prepared for herself. She put it all on a plate and handed it to the man, who sat at the table with a reverence that bordered on religious gratitude. "Go ahead and eat," Helen said. "It's not much, but it's what I've got." The man picked up the spoon and began to eat slowly, as if savoring every bite. Helen stood, watching him. There was something strange happening inside her, a feeling she couldn't identify. It was as if some distant memory was trying to surface. "Do you live here alone?" the man asked between bites. "I do," Helen answered curtly. "How long?" "A long time." The man nodded, respecting her reserve. He continued eating in silence for a few minutes. Then, almost shyly, he asked, "Do you have any family?" The question hit Helen like a punch to the gut. For a moment she couldn't answer. The old pain, which she kept locked inside her chest, threatened to overflow, but she controlled herself as she always did. "No," she finally said, her voice softer. "I don't have anyone." The man looked at her, and Helen had the impression that he could see beyond her words, could feel the sadness she was trying to hide. There was empathy in his gaze, an understanding that came from someone who also knew loneliness. "Me neither," he said quietly. "I don't have anyone either." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with unspoken emotions. Helen sat down in the other chair, her hands clasped on the table. She didn't know why, but she felt she needed to stay there in that moment with this stranger who somehow didn't feel so strange anymore. "Where are you from?" she asked. The man finished eating before he answered. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and sighed deeply. "From far away," he said. "I've been traveling for a while, looking for I'm not sure what. Answers, maybe. A place where I belong. Someone who—" He stopped, as if he had said too much. Helen waited, but he didn't continue. "And did you find it?" she asked. The man gave a sad smile. "Not yet, but I keep looking." Helen nodded slowly. She understood. That more than he could possibly imagine. The endless search for something that might never be found. The stubborn hope that refused to die completely, even after so many disappointments. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The man noticed and stood up. "I should go," he said. "I've taken advantage of your hospitality for too long." But as he stood, something happened. Maybe it was the way the evening light illuminated his face. Maybe it was the way he tilted his head. Or maybe it was just the accumulated weight of all. Those memories Helen had been trying to suppress all day. But something inside her stirred, a recognition that made no sense, an impossible familiarity. She looked at his face more closely. The dark eyes, the line of his jaw, the way he furrowed his brow when he was thinking. And suddenly, as if a veil had been lifted, she saw it. Not the man standing in front of her, but the boy he had been. A 6-year-old boy with the same eyes, the same way of tilting his head when he was confused or worried. Helen's heart pounded. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Her brain tried to rationalize, to find logical explanations, but her heart, that mother's heart that had never stopped searching, knew. It just knew. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The man looked at her, surprised by the sudden change in her tone. "Gabriel," he answered. "My name is Gabriel." The world stopped. The air seemed to leave Helen's lungs. She grabbed the table to keep from falling, feeling her legs go weak. Gabriel, the name she had repeated thousands of times over the years, in prayers, in dreams, in moments of despair, the name of the son she had lost. "Gabriel," she repeated, more to herself than to him. The man frowned, sensing something was wrong. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need to sit down?" But Helen couldn't speak. Tears began to stream down her wrinkled face, tears she had held back for so long that they now seemed to gush uncontrollably. She looked at this man, at those eyes she knew, at that face that carried traces of the baby she had rocked, of the boy she had lost. And then, in a voice that was just a broken whisper, she said the words that had been stuck in her throat for more than 20 years. "Gabriel, my son." The silence that followed those words was deafening. Gabriel stood frozen, staring at the elderly woman before him as if she had spoken in a foreign language he couldn't comprehend. His brain tried to process what he had just heard, but it was as if the words made no sense, as if they belonged to an alternate reality. "What?" was all he could manage to say, his voice coming out hoarse and uncertain. Helen was trembling, her hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The tears continued to fall, tracing paths through the deep furrows of her aged face. She tried to speak, but the emotion was too overwhelming, her throat too tight. All she could do was look at him, at that face that was so familiar and yet so unknown. "You're my son," she repeated, her voice broken but firmer this time. "My Gabriel, I know it's you. I know those eyes. I know that way you furrow your brow. You're my boy." Gabriel took a step back as if the words were physical blows. His head started to spin, fragmented and confusing memories flashing through his mind. A woman with dark hair holding his hand, a small house, the smell of simple food, a voice singing a lullaby. But these memories were so old, so distant, that he was never sure if they were real or just constructs of his desperate imagination. "No," he said, shaking his head. "No, that can't be. My mother left me. She abandoned me when I was a kid. She didn't want me. No." Helen's voice cut through the air like a cry of pain. "No, my son, I never abandoned you, never. I looked for you. I looked for years, for decades. I never stopped looking." Gabriel felt his legs give way. He leaned against the wooden wall, trying to stay upright as his entire world began to crumble. Everything he had believed, the entire story he had constructed about his life, about who he was being called into question in that moment. "Joyce," Helen continued, the words tumbling out, urgent. "It was a woman named Joyce. She said she would take care of you, that she'd take you to a good family in New York City, just until I could get back on my feet. But she disappeared. She took you and disappeared. I went after you, Gabriel. I went to the police. I looked everywhere. But I could never find you." Gabriel squeezed his eyes shut, trying to organize the chaotic thoughts flooding his mind. Joyce, that name. He knew that name. She was the woman who had taken care of him when he was little, before he was adopted by the Hamilton family. She had told him his mother had left, that she had a new life and didn't want anything to do with him anymore. But could she have been lying? Could everything he believed be false? "I don't understand," he murmured, opening his eyes and looking at Helen with a mixture of confusion and pain. "If you looked for me, why did you never find me? How is it possible that for all these years—" "I was poor, Gabriel," Helen interrupted, her voice heavy with a deep sadness. "I had no resources, no influence, nothing. The police didn't take my case seriously. To them, I was just another destitute woman who had given her son away and now wanted him back. They didn't understand. No one understood that I hadn't given you away, that I was just trying to give you a chance at a better life." Gabriel felt something break inside him. An old anger, a hurt he had carried for so long, began to morph into something different, something more complicated. He had spent his entire life believing his mother didn't want him, that he wasn't good enough, that there was something wrong with him that made her abandon him. That belief had shaped who he became, had influenced every decision, every relationship, every moment of his life. And now this woman, this frail elderly woman, was telling him it was all a lie, that she had looked for him, that she had never stopped loving him. "Sit down, son," Helen said softly, extending a trembling hand toward him. "Please sit. Let's talk. We need to talk." Gabriel hesitated. Part of him wanted to run, to flee from this devastating revelation, to return to the ignorant safety of his old life. But another part, a deeper part, knew he couldn't. Not now. Not after this. He needed to know the truth, no matter how painful. Slowly he moved to the chair and sat down. Helen sat across from him, her hands still shaking, her eyes still wet with tears. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two souls torn apart by the same tragedy, finally reunited after so long. "Tell me," Gabriel said at last, his voice barely a whisper. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." And Helen told him. With her voice choked with emotion, she recounted everything. She spoke of how she was left alone after Gabriel's father left, of how she struggled to raise the boy, by herself, taking any job she could find. She spoke of the crushing poverty, of the nights she went to bed hungry so Gabriel could eat. She spoke of the desperation that led her to trust Joyce, of the promise that it would be temporary, of the unbearable pain of watching her son leave. "When you left," Helen said, her voice breaking, "it was like they ripped my heart out of my chest. Every day without you was agony. I worked during the day, saved every penny I could, and at night I'd search for information. I asked everyone, showed your picture, begged for help. But Joyce had vanished without a trace, and you with her." She paused, wiping away the tears that wouldn't stop falling. "I went to New York City several times. I walked streets I didn't even know existed, knocked on strangers' doors, searched in orphanages, in churches, anywhere I thought you might be. But I never found anything. It was as if you had disappeared from the face of the earth." Gabriel listened in silence, each word piercing his soul like a sharp blade. He wanted to doubt, to find flaws in the story, to protect himself from the pain he felt growing inside him. But he couldn't. There was something in Helen's voice, in the way she spoke, that was impossible to deny. This was the pain of a mother who had lost her child, a raw and authentic pain that could not be faked. "And you?" Helen asked softly, her eyes searching his. "What happened to you, my son? Where have you been all these years?" Gabriel ran a hand over his face, trying to piece together the fragmented memories of his childhood. "I don't remember much from the early years," he began slowly. "The memories are fuzzy, like pieces of a puzzle that don't quite fit. I remember a small house, a woman singing, feeling safe. But then everything changed." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Joyce took me to New York City, like you said. She looked after me for a while, but she wasn't affectionate. She told me my mother had left, that you had left me because you didn't want me anymore. I cried every night, asking when you were coming back, but she always said the same thing, that you were never coming back, that I had to forget you. Helen let out a moan of pain, covering her mouth with her hands. To hear of her son's suffering, to know he had grown up believing she had abandoned him, was a torture worse than anything she had ever experienced. After a couple of years, Gabriel continued, his voice taking on a more distant tone, as if he were disconnecting from the pain of the memories, Joyce took me to a family, the Hamiltons. They were rich, lived in an upscale neighborhood in New York. They had a huge house, cars, everything a person could want, and they adopted me. He laughed without humor. It should have been a happy ending, right? The poor boy saved by the rich family, but it wasn't. They wanted me as a trophy, as a good deed to show off to their friends. I had expensive clothes, went to a private school, had everything materially, but I didn't have love. I never had love. Gabriel looked directly at Helen, and she could see the deep pain in his eyes. I grew up believing there was something wrong with me, that if my own mother didn't want me, if the family that adopted me couldn't truly love me, then the problem must be me. I spent my whole life trying to be good enough, trying to deserve someone's love. But I never could. Tears were now streaming down Gabriel's face too. And the worst part is, I was angry with you. So much hatred for you for abandoning me. I dreamed of finding you one day, just to tell you how much you hurt me, how much your absence destroyed my life. But now, his voice failed him, and he had to stop, choked with emotion. Helen slowly rose from her chair and approached him. Her old trembling hands touched Gabriel's face with infinite gentleness, as if she were touching something precious and fragile that might break at any moment. "My son," she whispered, her voice full of love and regret. "My boy, if I could go back in time, if I could change things, I would do everything differently. I should have never trusted Joyce. I should have never let you go, no matter how hard things were. But I thought I was doing what was best for you. I just wanted you to have a chance to be happy." Gabriel held her hands, squeezing them tightly, as if clinging to a life raft in the middle of a stormy ocean. "I know," he said, his voice broken. "I know that now. But so many years were lost. So many things we never had. I needed you, Mum. I needed you so much." The word Mum left his lips for the first time in decades, and as he said it, something inside Gabriel shattered completely. He began to cry for real, deep sobs that shook his entire body. Helen pulled him into her arms, holding him with all the strength her frail body allowed, and cried with him. They stayed like that for a long time, mother and son finally reunited, weeping for the lost years, for the shared pain, for the injustice of it all. The small cabin witnessed that moment of pain and reconciliation, its old walls absorbing the tears and moans of two souls who had finally found each other again. When they finally separated, they were both emotionally and physically exhausted. Night had fallen completely, and the only light came from the kerosene lamp Helen had lit earlier. The shadows danced on the walls, creating an atmosphere that was both intimate and surreal. "How did you end up here?" Helen asked, wiping her face with the hem of her apron. "How did you find your way to me?" Gabriel took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. "I was looking for something," he said. "A few months ago the Hamiltons passed away. They were old, and I was the sole heir. Suddenly I had everything. Money, properties, businesses, but none of it made sense. I would look around and realize I was completely alone in the world. I had no one who truly cared about me. No one who truly loved me." He looked at his own hands as if searching for answers in them. "I started thinking about you, about who you were, where you might be. Were you still alive? Did you regret what you did? I needed to know. So I left everything behind and started searching. I looked through old records, tried to track down Joyce, asked people who might have known you." "And did you find anything?" Helen asked, holding her breath. "Fragments," Gabriel replied. "I found out you had lived near Oakhaven years ago. Someone told me you had moved further into the country to an isolated place. I spent weeks looking, going from town to town, asking around. My money ran out along the way. I had to sell some things, hitchhike, walk. I don't know what I expected to find. Answers, maybe. Maybe just peace. He looked at Helen with an expression that mixed disbelief with something that might have been gratitude. And then I saw the smoke coming from the chimney of this house. I was tired, hungry, lost. I thought I'd ask for food, rest a bit before continuing. I never imagined that you'd find what you were looking for, Helen completed, a small, sad smile appearing on her tired face. Gabriel nodded. It's like fate brought me here. After all these years, all this distance, I ended up knocking on your exact door. They fell silent again, processing the magnitude of that moment. There was so much to be said, so many questions to be answered, so many wounds to be healed. But there was also a strange peace beginning to form, a sense that maybe, just maybe, things could start to mend. Stay, Helen said suddenly, her voice firm despite the emotional tremor. Stay tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk more, we'll figure out what to do, but tonight just stay. Let me have my son near me, if only for one night. Gabriel looked around the humble cabin, seeing the extreme poverty his mother lived in. His heart ached as he realized that while he grew up in mansions, attended expensive schools, and had everything materially, she was here, in this forgotten place, living with the bare minimum to survive. The injustice of it all was almost unbearable. I'll stay, he said, but not just tonight, Mom. I'm not leaving you again. Never again. Helen began to cry again, but this time they were different tears. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of a hope she thought she had lost long ago. She held Gabriel's face between her hands and looked into his eyes, memorizing every detail, every line, as if she feared he might disappear if she blinked. I love you, she said, the words she had kept locked away for so many years finally being set free. I have always loved you. Every day, every night, I thought of you. I prayed that you were okay, that you were happy. You were always my son, Gabriel. Always. I love you too, Mom, Gabriel replied, and as he said those words, he felt as if a huge weight was being lifted from his shoulders. A weight he had carried since childhood, the pain of abandonment, the feeling of being unloved, of not belonging anywhere. All of it began to dissipate in the presence of this fragile but strong woman who had been through so much and never gave up. That night, Helen made a makeshift bed for Gabriel with the few blankets she had. It wasn't comfortable, it wasn't luxurious, but for Gabriel it was perfect, because for the first time in his life, he was sleeping under the same roof as his real mother, the woman who had loved him since before he was born. Before he fell asleep, Helen sat beside him, stroking his hair as she used to when he was little. Gabriel closed his eyes, letting himself be enveloped by that simple but profound affection. And in that moment, despite all the pain, despite all the questions that still needed to be answered, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time: peace, sleep. My son, Helen whispered, tomorrow is a new day, and this time we'll face it together. Gabriel fell asleep to the sound of his mother's voice in his ears, and for the first time in decades, his dreams were not haunted by nightmares of abandonment and loneliness. He dreamed of old memories that now made sense, of a future that could perhaps be built on the ruins of the past. Helen stayed awake longer, watching the son she had lost and found again. Her heart was full of conflicting emotions: joy, sadness, hope, fear. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. There were so many wounds, so much lost time, so many things to be reconciled. But for the first time in many years, Helen felt that her life had a purpose again. Her son had come back. Against all odds, against all expectations, he had come back to her, and she would do everything in her power to make up for the lost years, to give him the love she had always wanted to give, to prove that he was always wanted, always loved. Outside, the night was silent. The stars shone in the dark sky, mute, witnesses to this impossible reunion. And inside the small cabin, amidst the poverty and simplicity, something rare and precious was happening. A family was being rebuilt, a love was being rediscovered, and two broken lives were beginning the long process of healing. The morning arrived, bringing with it a soft light that filtered through the cracks in the cabin. Gabriel opened his eyes slowly, disoriented for a few seconds. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Then the memories of the previous night came rushing back, and he felt his heart quicken. It hadn't been a dream. He had found his mother, his real mother. He got up slowly, his body aching from sleeping on the hard floor. He looked around and saw Helen already awake, sitting at the table, drinking her weak coffee. She looked tired, her eyes swollen from crying, but there was something different about her face, a light that wasn't there before, a hope. "Good morning, Mum," Gabriel said, and the word still sounded strange on his tongue, but at the same time, incredibly right. Helen looked at him and smiled, a shy but genuine smile. "Good morning, my son. Did you sleep? Well, better than I have in years," he answered honestly. They had breakfast together, sharing the little that Helen had. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but filled with an intimacy that was still being built. There were so many things to be said, so many questions to be asked, but they both knew they needed time. You don't rebuild 20-some lost years in a single night. After breakfast, Gabriel looked around the cabin carefully. In the daylight, the precariousness of Helen's living conditions was even more evident. The walls had holes, the roof was in terrible shape, the furniture was old and broken. There was no running water, no electricity, no basic comforts. "Mom," he said softly, "you can't keep living like this. This place isn't safe, it's not healthy." Helen shrugged, a gesture that revealed years of resignation. "It's what I have, son, it's what I've always had, I'm used to it." "But it doesn't have to be this way," Gabriel insisted, sitting across from her and taking her calloused hands in his. "I still have some money. Not a lot because I spent most of it looking for you, but enough to fix up this house, to bring in some basic things. Let me take care of you now. Let me do what I should have been doing for years." Helen looked at her son with teary eyes. "You don't owe me anything, Gabriel. What happened wasn't your fault. You were a child." "I know," he replied, "but now I'm a grown man and you're my mother. Let me help, please." Helen hesitated, but finally nodded, not out of need, though she had plenty, but because she realized that Gabriel needed to do this. He needed to feel that he could do something, that he could somehow make up for lost time. In the days that followed, Gabriel started working on the house. He fixed the roof, patched the holes in the walls, repaired the falling door. He had no construction experience, so he often did things wrong and had to redo them. But he didn't give up. Helen watched him work, and her heart filled with an emotion she couldn't name. It was pride, it was love, it was gratitude for having her son back. At night they talked, long, deep conversations that slowly revealed who they really were. Gabriel told her about his life with the Hamiltons, about growing up surrounded by luxury but empty inside. He spoke of relationships that never worked out because he couldn't trust anyone, of friends who were only interested in his money, of the loneliness that accompanied him even in the middle of crowds. Helen, in turn, told him about the years of searching, about every lead that ended in nothing, about the nights spent crying alone, about how she gradually withdrew from the world until she ended up in this isolated place where she could exist without being judged. "I was ashamed," she confessed one night, "ashamed of having lost my son, ashamed that I couldn't protect you. People looked at me with pity or judgment and I couldn't take it anymore. It was easier to come here, to be alone." "You didn't lose anything, Mom," Gabriel said firmly. "You were tricked. They stole your son from you. It wasn't your fault. But I should have been smarter, more careful. I should have been suspicious of Joyce." "How could you have been? She seemed like a good person, someone who wanted to help. You were desperate, wanting the best for me. Any mother would have done the same." These conversations were difficult but necessary. Every word spoken was like pulling out a thorn that had been embedded for years. It hurt, but it was necessary for the wound to finally heal. About 2 weeks after Gabriel arrived, they were sitting outside the cabin, enjoying the late afternoon. Gabriel had managed to buy some basic supplies in the nearest town: real food, new blankets, even a small battery-powered radio so Helen could listen to music and news. "You know," Gabriel said thoughtfully, I've been thinking about what to do now, about the future. Helen looked at him curiously. And what have you been thinking? I don't want to go back to New York City, to that empty life. But I also know we can't stay here forever. This place is too isolated, and you need care, to be near doctors, to have access to basic things. I'm fine here, son, Helen began, but Gabriel gently interrupted her. You survive here, Mom. That's not the same as being fine, and I want you to be fine, to be comfortable, to enjoy the years you have left. Helen was silent for a moment, processing her son's words. And what do you suggest? Gabriel took a deep breath. I want us to move to a town, not New York City because I never felt at home there, but maybe Oak Haven, or a town nearby, a place where we can start over together. I can work, I can take care of you, and we can finally have the life that was stolen from us. Helen felt her eyes well up with tears again. She had cried so much in the past few weeks, she thought she had no tears left, but she always found more. You would do that for me? Leave everything behind to be with me? It's not for you, Mom, Gabriel corrected. It's for us, for the family we can be. I have nothing to leave behind. That life was never really mine. But here, with you, I feel like I've finally found my place. Helen held her son's hand, squeezing it tightly. Then let's do it. Let's start over together. The decision was made. In the following days, Gabriel went to the nearest town and began making arrangements. He had some money saved, enough to rent a simple house and support them for a few months while he looked for work. It wouldn't be luxurious, but it would be infinitely better than the remote cabin where Helen lived. While Gabriel handled the practical matters, Helen began to prepare herself emotionally for the move. She had lived in that place for so many years, it felt like a part of her. But at the same time, she knew she couldn't be trapped in the past. Her son had returned, and with him came the opportunity for a different future. One afternoon, while they were packing Helen's few belongings, Gabriel found an old box under the bed. It was wooden, small, with a dusty lid. What's this, Mom? He asked. Helen looked at the box and her face turned pale. It's better to leave that, son. It's just old things. But Gabriel was already opening the box, driven by curiosity. Inside he found old photos, some so faded you could barely make out the images. There was a photo of a young Helen holding a baby in her arms. Gabriel realized that baby was him. There were also children's drawings, made with colored pencils on paper yellowed with time. Some looked like boats, others like houses, all signed with Gabriel in crooked, childish letters. You kept all of this, Gabriel said, his voice thick with emotion. Helen came closer, looking at the contents of the box with a mixture of pain and love. It was all I had of you. Every photo, every drawing you made before you left. I would look at these things when the longing was too much, when I needed to remember that you were real, that you weren't just a dream. Gabriel held one of the photos, studying the image of his young, happy mother. It was hard to reconcile that woman with the tired elderly lady before him. Time and suffering had transformed them both in ways they could never have imagined. I'm going to make new memories with you, Mom, he promised. I'm going to take so many pictures you won't have room to keep them all. And I'm going to do everything I can to see you smile for real, not that sad smile you've been giving. Helen laughed through her tears. You were always a sweet boy, Gabriel. I remember that. You always tried to make me smile, even when we were poor and had nothing. It seems some things don't change. Finally moving. Day arrived. Gabriel had managed to rent a small but comfortable house in Oak Haven. It had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with running water, a kitchen with a gas stove, and even a small yard where Helen could plant a garden. It wasn't a mansion, but for someone who had lived in a cabin without basic infrastructure for years, it felt like a palace. When Helen entered the house for the first time, she stood in the doorway looking around with wide eyes. Gabriel stood behind her, anxious for her reaction. So, Mom, what do you think? Helen couldn't answer right away. She walked slowly through the rooms, touching the walls, looking out the real glass window, turning the faucets on and off just to see the water run. When she reached the room that would be hers with a new bed Gabriel had bought, she finally turned to him with tears in her eyes. It's perfect, my son, she said. It's more than I ever dreamed of having again." Gabriel hugged her, feeling the fragility of her body. "You deserve this, and so much more. And I'm going to work hard to make sure you have a good life from now on." The first few days in the new house were an adjustment. It took Helen time to get used to the basic amenities that were normal for most people. She was amazed by simple things like being able to take a hot shower, having electric light at night, cooking on a real stove. Gabriel watched all of this with a heavy heart, realizing how much his mother had been deprived of for so long. He found a job at a local hardware store. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to cover rent and buy food. Gabriel was used to luxury, but he discovered he didn't miss it. There was a satisfaction in working an honest job, in knowing he was supporting himself and his mother with his own effort. The evenings were the times they both cherished most. After dinner, they would sit in the small living room and talk, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence, enjoying each other's presence. Helen started teaching Gabriel how to cook the simple dishes of his childhood, and he discovered he enjoyed it. The simplicity of preparing food with his hands, of sharing meals made with love. But not everything was easy. There were moments when the weight of the past was still too heavy. Gabriel would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, haunted by nightmares of his childhood, of the years he grew up feeling unloved and unwanted. Helen, for her part, had days when the guilt was overwhelming, when she wondered if she had made the right choice in letting Gabriel go with Joyce, even knowing she had no alternative. In these difficult moments, they learned to lean on each other. Gabriel learned to be patient with Helen's moments of deep sadness, to hold her hand when she cried, to reassure her that she was not to blame for what happened. Helen, in turn, learned to comfort Gabriel when he struggled with his own wounds, to show through small gestures the unconditional love she had always felt for him. One day, a few months after the move, Gabriel came home from work to find Helen in the yard, tending to the garden she had planted. She was on her knees in the dirt, her hands dirty, but there was a genuine smile on her face. It was the first time Gabriel had seen that smile, and his heart filled with joy. "Look at this," Helen said excitedly when she saw him. "The tomatoes are growing, and the lettuce looks beautiful. Soon we'll have fresh vegetables to eat." Gabriel knelt beside her, looking at the plants with interest. "Are you happy here, Mum?" Helen stopped what she was doing and looked at her son. "Happier than I've been in many, many years. You gave me a second chance, Gabriel. A chance to be a mother again, to take care of you like I always wanted. How could I not be happy?" But there was something in Gabriel's eyes that Helen noticed. A restlessness, a worry he was trying to hide. "What is it, son? Is something bothering you?" Gabriel sighed, sitting down on the grass. "I was thinking, we're doing well. We have a house. We have food. We have each other. But sometimes I feel like it's not enough. Not for me, not selfishly, but I see so many people in town who are going through the same thing you went through. People who are alone, people who are poor, people who have been forgotten by society." He looked at Helen with intensity. "And I wonder, couldn't we do something? Make a difference in their lives? I had a life of luxury that didn't make me happy, but now I understand that true value lies in helping others, in using what we have to do good." Helen listened in silence, feeling something awaken inside her, a feeling she had forgotten, a purpose that went beyond mere survival. "What do you have in mind?" "I don't know exactly yet," Gabriel admitted, "but I was thinking maybe we could start something small, a place where people with nowhere to go can get a hot meal, or a blanket, or just someone to listen to them. It doesn't have to be anything grand, just something that makes a difference." Helen felt her eyes fill with tears for the 1,000th time, but this time they were tears of pride. "My son," she said softly, "you have a beautiful heart. I don't know how, after everything you've been through, you managed to keep that kindness inside you." "It was because of you," Gabriel replied. "Even without knowing it, you taught me that. When you gave me food that day, when you opened your home to a stranger, even though you had so little, you showed me what really matters. You showed me that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in what we give." Mother and son embraced there in the yard, surrounded by the plants that were beginning to grow, symbols of new life and new beginnings. And in that moment, they both knew that this was just the beginning of something bigger than themselves, something that could bring hope not just to them, but to many others as well. "Then let's do it," Helen said with determination. "Together. Let's turn our pain into something good, something that helps other people. That's what gives meaning to everything we've been through." Gabriel nodded, feeling an excitement grow inside him. For the first time in his life, he had not only a mother, but also a purpose, and both of them, mother and son, were ready to face the future together, turning the scars of the past into seeds of hope for tomorrow. 6 months had passed since that conversation in the yard. What began as a vague idea had become a reality. Gabriel and Helen, working together with a determination that surprised them both, had created something special. A small community space they called Hope House. It wasn't much in the eyes of the world. It was just the garage of an abandoned house that Gabriel managed to rent for a symbolic price, transformed through hard work into a welcoming place. There were donated tables and chairs, a makeshift kitchen where Helen prepared simple but hearty meals, and walls painted in cheerful colors by volunteers who had joined their cause. But for those who came by, vulnerable people, workers who could barely support their families, lonely seniors, it was much more than just a physical space. It was a refuge, a place where they were seen as human beings, where their stories mattered. Gabriel had used the last of his savings to start the project, but he soon discovered he wasn't alone. Word about what he and Helen were doing spread through the town, and people began to show up offering help. Some brought donations of food, others offered their time as volunteers, and some even contributed small amounts of money to help keep the place running. On that particular Saturday morning, Hope House was especially busy. Helen was in the kitchen leading a team of 3 volunteers who were helping her prepare lunch. She had transformed in recent months. She was still the same 72-year-old woman with her wrinkles and white hair, but there was a vitality in her that hadn't existed before. Her eyes sparkled when she spoke to people. Her hands worked tirelessly, and that genuine smile Gabriel had first seen in the yard was now a constant on her face. Gabriel was in the main area, talking to a middle-aged man named Jim, who had lost his job 6 months ago and was struggling not to lose the house where he lived with his wife and 3 children. Gabriel listened to him intently, asking questions, offering practical advice on where to look for work, and connecting him with people he knew in town. "You have no idea what it means to have someone who really listens," Jim said, his eyes welling up. "Out there everyone looks at you like you're invisible, like you're worthless. But here you treat us with dignity. That's worth more than any money." Gabriel placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "Everyone deserves dignity, Jim. Everyone deserves to be seen. We're just doing what should be normal in any society." After Jim left, Gabriel stood for a moment watching the activity around him. There were about 30 people there at that moment, some eating, some just talking, some simply enjoying the human company after days or weeks of solitude. And each of them had a story, a struggle, a pain they carried. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Helen. "There's someone outside who wants to talk to you," she said. "It seems important." Gabriel went outside and found a woman at the door. She looked to be in her 50s, well-dressed, with an appearance that contrasted with most of the people who frequented Hope House. She seemed nervous, her hands clasped in front of her. "Can I help you?" Gabriel asked gently. The woman took a deep breath before speaking. "My name is Marcia Joyce Peterson. I heard about the work you're doing here, and I had to come. I had to meet you in person." Gabriel frowned, trying to understand why that name sounded familiar. Joyce. Where had he heard that name before? And then, like a lightning bolt, the memory returned. Joyce. The woman who had taken him away from his mother. His body tensed immediately. "Are you related to a woman named Joyce, a woman who lived in New York about 25 years ago?" Marcia seemed surprised by the question, but nodded slowly. "Yes, she was my mother. She passed away 3 years ago. But how do you know about her?" Gabriel felt a wave of confused emotions, anger, curiosity, an urgent need for answers. "Can you wait here a moment?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. He went inside quickly and found Helen, who was still in the kitchen. "Mom, you need to come with me now." Helen saw the expression on her son's face and immediately dropped what she was doing. They went outside together, and when Helen saw Marcia, she too froze. There was something in that face, in those eyes, that awakened old memories. "This is Marcia," Gabriel said, his voice tense. "Joyce's daughter." Helen brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide. The name that had haunted her for so many years, the name of the woman who had destroyed her life, was here again, brought by this stranger at her door. Marcia looked from one to the other, confused. "I don't understand. You knew my mother?" "Knew her?" Gabriel almost laughed, but it was a bitter, humorless laugh. "Your mother took me from my real mother when I was 6 years old. She promised it was temporary, that she would take me to a good family, and then I would come back. But she lied. She disappeared and took years of my life with her, years I'll never get back." Marcia turned pale. "No, that can't be. You're Gabriel?" The confirmation came in the heavy silence that followed. Marcia staggered, reaching for the wall for support. "Oh my God, all these years I thought... My mother always said she had done the right thing, that she had given you a better life. She said your mother had agreed, that she wanted you to be adopted." "She lied," Helen said, her voice trembling but firm. "She said it was temporary. She said I could get my son when things got better, but she vanished. She stole my son from me." Marcia was crying now. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know the whole truth. When I was young, my mother worked facilitating adoptions. She said she was helping poor children have a better life. But as I got older, I started to suspect that not everything was done by the book. She suddenly had a lot of money, things that didn't make sense." Anger welled up inside Gabriel. "She sold children. That's what she did. She took children from poor, desperate families and sold them to rich ones. I only found out the truth after she passed away," Marcia continued, sobbing. "I found documents, financial records, names. There were so many children. And when I saw your name, Gabriel, along with a picture of you as a little boy, and read her notes about how you had been placed with a wealthy family, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I've carried this guilt, this shame for years." She looked directly at Helen. "And then I heard about you, about Hope House, about a young man named Gabriel and his mother Helen, who were helping people in need here in Oakhaven. I had to know if it was you. And when I confirmed it, I knew I had to come. I had to ask for forgiveness on my mother's behalf, even though I know I have no right to ask." Helen and... Gabriel stood in silence, processing the revelation. Part of Gabriel wanted to explode, to scream out all the pain and anger he felt for the woman who had destroyed his childhood. But when he looked at Marcia, he saw only another person carrying a burden she hadn't chosen, another victim, in a way, of Joyce's actions. It was Helen who spoke first. "Why did you come here today? What do you want from us?" Marcia wiped her tears and opened her purse, taking out an envelope. "When my mother passed away, she left a considerable amount of money that I know came from wrongful practices, from destroyed lives. I can't use it for myself knowing where it came from. So I want to donate it all to your work, to Hope House. It won't undo the harm she did. It won't bring back the lost years. But maybe it can help do some good now." She held the envelope out to Gabriel. "This is all that's left of her inheritance, about $50,000. I know it doesn't make up for anything, but it's all I can offer besides my sincere apology." Gabriel looked at the envelope without taking it, then looked at Helen. His mother had tears in her eyes, but there was something else there too, an understanding, an emotional maturity that came from years of suffering and overcoming. "Gabriel," Helen said softly, "I've learned something these past few months. I've learned that hatred only hurts the one who hates. Joyce did a terrible, unforgivable thing, but she's not here anymore, and her daughter is not to blame for her mother's sins." She turned to Marcia. "You don't need to ask for forgiveness for something you didn't do, but I thank you for coming, for being honest, for wanting to do good with something that was born from evil." Gabriel took a deep breath, feeling the anger begin to dissolve. He realized his mother was right. Holding a grudge wouldn't change the past, wouldn't bring back the lost years. But accepting this donation, using this money to help others, could perhaps turn something bad into something good. He took the envelope from Marcia's hands. "Thank you," he said simply. "We'll use this to expand our work, to help more people. We'll turn pain into hope." Marcia let out a sigh of relief, more tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you for not sending me away, for giving me a chance to do something right." After Marcia left, Gabriel and Helen stood in the doorway, holding each other, processing everything that had just happened. It was surreal to think that the daughter of the woman who had caused so much suffering had shown up, wanting to make amends in some way. "Are you okay, Mum?" Gabriel asked. Helen nodded slowly. "I am. In fact, I feel a peace I didn't expect to feel. It's like a circle has been closed. Joyce took everything from me, but in the end, what she built with dirty money will be used for good. There's a poetic justice in that." Gabriel agreed. And in that moment, looking at Hope House full of people, at the work he and his mother had built together, he felt something he had never felt before: wholeness. He was no longer the abandoned boy, no longer the rich but empty young man. He had found his place in the world, beside his mother, making a difference in the lives of others. The following months were transformative. With the money donated by Marcia, Gabriel and Helen, were able to significantly expand the work of Hope House. They rented a larger space, brought on more volunteers, and began to offer not just meals, but also literacy classes, vocational training, and even a small micro-loan program to help people start small businesses. The impact was immense. Dozens of families were helped out of extreme poverty. People who had lost hope found a new purpose. And at the center of it all was Helen, who at 72 had become a sort of matriarch of the community, loved and respected by all. Gabriel also flourished. He discovered he had a talent for organization and leadership, skills he had never explored in his previous life. More importantly, he discovered that true wealth wasn't in the mansions and luxury cars of his adoptive childhood, but in the smiles of the people they helped, in the grateful hugs, in the stories of overcoming adversity. A year after their reunion, on a special night organized by the community to celebrate the anniversary of Hope House, Gabriel stood on a small makeshift stage to give a speech. Helen sat in the front row, surrounded by familiar faces that had become part of their new family. "A year and a half ago," Gabriel began, his voice clear and emotional, "I was a lost man. I had everything materially, but I had nothing that truly matters. I was searching for something, for someone, for a meaning to my life. And fate brought me here, to the door of a humble cabin, where a generous woman gave me food even though she had so little." He looked directly at Helen, who was already misty-eyed. "That woman was my mother. The mother I thought had abandoned me, but who in reality never stopped looking for me, never stopped loving me. And on that day, when we finally found each other again, my life took on a new meaning." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But this story isn't just about me and my mother. It's about all of you, about every person who has walked through that door seeking help and found not just food or shelter, but dignity and respect. About every volunteer who donates their time because they understand that we are all connected, that the pain of one is the pain of all, and the joy of one should be the joy of all." The audience began to applaud, but Gabriel gently raised his hand, asking for one more moment. "I've learned that the mistakes of the past, no matter how painful, can become seeds of hope for the future. My mother and I lost many years together, years we'll never get back. But instead of being trapped in that pain, we decided to transform it into something that could help others. And today, looking at all of you, seeing the lives that have been touched, I know we made the right choice." He extended his hand to Helen, who stood up and joined him, on stage. Gabriel hugged her tightly and she hugged him back, her small but strong arms around the son she had found again. "This woman," Gabriel said, his voice breaking, "taught me the true meaning of unconditional love. She taught me that no matter how many times life knocks you down, you can always choose to get back up. She taught me that true strength isn't in having much, but in giving what you have, however little it may be. Helen, now crying openly, took the microphone from her son's hands. "My son," she said, her voice old but full, "of life, you gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. A purpose, a reason to wake up every day with hope. You showed me that it's never too late to start over, never too late to make a difference." She looked out at the audience, at all those faces that had become so dear to her. "I spent many years alone believing the world had forgotten me, but my son came back, and with him came not only the love I had longed for, but an entire family. Each and every one of you is part of that family now. And together we are proving that it's possible to turn pain into hope, loneliness into community, despair into love." The room erupted in applause and tears. People hugged each other, sharing the emotion of that special moment. And at the center of it all, Gabriel and Helen remained in an embrace, mother and son finally reunited, not just physically, but in purpose and heart. After the event, when everyone had gone home and it was just Gabriel and Helen cleaning up the space, they paused for a moment, looking around. "Do you have any regrets?" Helen asked, suddenly. "About leaving behind the life you had before?" Gabriel didn't hesitate. "Not for a second. That life was never really mine. It was a fantasy, an illusion of happiness. But this," he gestured around them, "this is real. This connection with you, with these people, this feeling of doing something that matters, this is real, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world." Helen smiled, that smile that had become so common on her face in recent months. "I wouldn't trade it either, my son. I went through so much, lost so much, but in the end, I got back what mattered most. And more than that, I got the chance to make a difference, to turn my pain into something good for others." They finished cleaning and walked home together under the starry Oak Haven sky. The house Gabriel had rented for them, which at first had seemed like a palace to Helen, was now simply home, a place full of love, of memories being made, of laughter and conversations and plans for the future. Before bed, as was their custom now, Gabriel went to Helen's room to say goodnight. She was sitting on the bed looking at the old wooden box she had brought from the cabin, filled with old photos and children's drawings. "Still looking at that?" Gabriel asked softly, sitting beside her. "Sometimes," Helen admitted, "not out of sadness, but to remind myself of where we came from, of how far we've come, and to never forget that even in the darkest moments there is always hope. I never gave up on you, Gabriel. Even when it seemed impossible, I kept believing that one day I would find you." Gabriel picked up one of the photos, the one of a young, smiling Helen holding a baby in her arms. "Let's take a new one," he said. "A picture of us now as we are today, to start a new collection of memories, happy memories that we'll build together from now on." Helen loved the idea, and we'll fill this house with photos of the two of us, of the people from Hope House, of all the good times we still have to live. Gabriel kissed his mother's forehead. "Good night, Mom. I love you." "Good night, my son. I love you too. Always have, always will." In the years that followed, Hope House continued to grow. Gabriel and Helen became well-known and respected figures in Oak Haven and the surrounding towns. Their story of separation and reunion, of pain transformed into hope, inspired many others to do their part, to look around and see where they could make a difference. Helen lived to be 80, surrounded by the love of her son and the community she had helped build. When her time came to pass, it was in peace, knowing that her life, despite all its suffering, had been meaningful. She had loved and been loved. She had made a difference in the lives of hundreds of people. And most importantly, she had been given the chance to be a mother again, to reclaim the lost years with her son. Gabriel continued the work after Helen's passing, honoring her memory through every person he helped, every life he touched. And whenever someone asked why he did it, why he dedicated his life to helping strangers, he would tell the story of an elderly woman who lived in a remote cabin, who lost everything but never lost hope, and who taught him that the true value of a life is not in what we accumulate, but in what we give and the love we share. The small Hope House that began in a rented garage eventually grew into a network of community centers, helping thousands of people throughout the region. But the heart of it all was always that first house, where a mother and son, separated by cruelty and reunited by fate, decided to turn their shared pain into hope for others. And so, what began as a tragedy transformed into a story of redemption, of unconditional love, and of the transformative power of hope. Helen and Gabriel proved that it's never too late to start over, that the deepest wounds can heal, and that even from the most desperate situations, something beautiful and meaningful can be born. Their story was a testament that true love never dies, that a mother never forgets her child, and that when we have the courage to forgive, to accept, and to transform our pain into compassion for others, we are capable of creating change that reaches far beyond our own lives.